The science lab smelled faintly of chemicals, chalk, and fresh paper. Students shuffled in, talking over one another, ignoring the woman standing at the front. Miss Harper had been teaching at the high school for barely 2 weeks, yet the murmurs about her had already started. Too strict, too quiet, too different. She wore her hair tied back, her eyes sharp, but she never raised her voice. Students mistook her calm for weakness. One student in particular was ready to test it. That student was Blake Carter, the kind of senior who walked the halls like he owned them. Broad-shouldered, with a cruel smirk and a following of boys who laughed at his every insult, he'd made a sport out of intimidating teachers. Today, the moment he stepped into the lab and saw Miss Harper in her crisp blouse, adjusting beakers with precision, he decided she'd be his next target. Miss Harper ignored the murmured jokes and started the lesson, explaining how certain compounds reacted under heat. The burners flickered, the glass clinked. But Blake wasn't paying attention. He was tossing a pencil in the air, knocking on the desk, making loud, sarcastic remarks. His friend snickered. She asked him, once, politely, to stop. Twice, firmly. On the third interruption, she told him to see her after class. That's when the smirk disappeared. Blake didn't like being challenged in front of others. His jaw tightened, and something mean flashed in his eyes. The class shifted uncomfortably, sensing the tension. Blake stood up, walking toward her slowly. His friends chuckled, egging him on. "What's the problem, miss?" he said, stepping into her space. Scared. Before anyone could react, his hand shot out and clamped around her throat. Gasps filled the room. A girl dropped her pen. Miss Harper's back hit the counter, but her face didn't change. No fear. No shock. Just a steady, measured stare. Blake squeezed harder, expecting her to panic. That's when it happened. Her hand snapped up like lightning, gripping his wrist and twisting it in a controlled but brutal motion. Blake let out a sharp cry as his knees buckled. In one step, she pivoted, using his weight against him, slamming him chest first onto the counter without breaking a beaker. Her voice was low, commanding, the kind that could cut through a battlefield. "Let go, or I will make sure you never hold anything again." The class froze, wide-eyed. Someone whispered, "She's done this before." And they were right. Miss Harper's past wasn't a mystery to everyone, but it wasn't something she advertised. 10 years in the military. Tours overseas. Hand-to-hand combat instructor. She'd seen more than any of these kids could imagine. She didn't tolerate bullies. Not in the barracks, and not in her classroom. She released Blake only when the principal arrived, summoned by a terrified freshman who'd run for help. Blake stumbled back, holding his wrist, face pale. Miss Harper calmly explained the situation, her voice even. The principal, knowing her background and the seriousness of the assault, didn't ask her to apologize. Instead, Blake was escorted out, his future suddenly far less certain. By the end of the day, the story had spread through every hallway. "Did you hear?" Miss Harper dropped Blake like a rag doll. Students who once ignored her now looked at her with respect, and maybe a little fear. Even Blake's friends avoided making eye contact with her. In the following weeks, Miss Harper continued teaching as if nothing had happened. But the atmosphere had changed. The snickers were gone. The interruptions disappeared. She didn't rule through intimidation, she ruled through earned respect. The challenges she faced that day weren't just about Blake. She'd confronted public assault, the risk of her reputation, and the possibility of losing her career if things had gone too far. But her discipline, honed through years of service, allowed her to handle it with precision. Her message to her students was subtle but unforgettable: strength isn't loud. It's controlled, precise, and used only when necessary. And for Blake, who now had a permanent mark on his school record and a broken sense of invincibility, the lesson was harsher: pick the wrong target, and your career, your future, can end before it begins. Miss Harper's presence in the school became more than just that of a teacher. She was a protector, a role model, and living proof that sometimes, the quietest person in the room is the most dangerous.